Welcome to In the News for September 23rd, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. Happy iPhone 14 week.
Indeed.
You've had it. I remember a week ago, we ended our recording session, and because you had to jump up, your iPhone arrived at your office. So you have now had a week with the brand new iPhone 14 Pro, and you actually wrote a fantastic review of it this past week on the blog as well.
Yeah, and and even since I wrote that review, I've enjoyed it even more and more. It's the iPhone 14 Pro. It's nice. Every year, the new iPhone has always got something that's nice to it. But as I pointed out in the review, some years feel just a little bit more special than others, and this is really one of them. I mean, let me start by talking about that whole dynamic island thing at the top. It is
please, yes,
brilliant.
Let's go.
It is a brilliant user interface design that Apple came up with. It's one of those things that every day I'm looking at my phone, I'm like, why haven't we had this forever? It's so nice. Let me just give you one example that I didn't even talk about in my review. Because everything sort of goes up there. I was on a phone call yesterday because, I do phone calls, all the time with clients and stuff like that on my phone. And if you're actually in the phone app, then you can actually see how many minutes the phone call has been going on so far, right?
Right.
But oftentimes I'm like out of the phone app because while I'm talking to somebody, I'm looking at an email or, I'm doing other things on the phone while I'm having the phone conversation. And what I love is the dynamic island up there. It gets a little bit bigger because you're having the phone call, and that island is indicating that the phone app is running in the background. And it's got a little indicator out there of how long the phone conversation's been going on, which, maybe this is just because I'm a lawyer and, we bill our time and stuff like that. But I just find it helpful as I look up there, I can see, okay, we've been talking for about 22 minutes so far. It's just the sort of thing that it normally, of course, I could always get that information. And in the past, I might go back and look after the call is over. You can go into your phone app and look in recents and see how long it lasted. But it's just like those little bits of information that just show up there. And then, of course, as I talked about in the review, anything that's playing a song or a podcast or something like that, having the instant controls, it's a great place to get information. And as we mentioned, I think last week when 16.1 comes out, hopefully sometime soon, we will have live updates, which will get even more information. But what I've actually been just, although we don't have live updates per se right now, we have something akin to it. Because, for example, for the phone app, putting up there how much time you've been on the phone, that's like a live update, right? It's a countdown timer or a count up timer. And likewise, if you've got the timer up there, that can be a countdown timer. So there are certain native built-in apps from Apple that do update in real time up there. One more example. This one's totally silly, but I just love it. And this is a perfect example of the dynamic island. Part of it is useful and I love it. And part of it is just like beautiful and I love it. When I was talking about phone calls, on the left side, you have how long your phone call has been going on for so long. So far. But on the right side, there's like it's sort of like a waveform indicator that goes from orange to green. And as the other person is talking, you'll see the orange part just sort of get bigger and smaller. And as you're talking, the green part gets bigger and smaller. And is there any reason that I need to see that? No. But does it look darn cool? Absolutely. It looks really, really cool. So it's just another perfect example of, it's just delighting you. And I really enjoy it. So the dynamic island has been fun to work with all week. It really is a form of multitasking. It allows you to be in one app while you're still getting some information or have easy access to another app. And I love it. I really, really love it.
Something interesting that you mentioned here, which I didn't think about, is you said if a second app wants to use, or you say if the second app wants to visit Dynamic Island, then the island splits. One app gets a longer island on the left, and the other island gets a small round island on the right. And I hadn't thought about that. You just mentioned multitasking, Jeff, and that's really neat. Like, we've had multitasking. We've talked a lot about it on the iPad, and people have always clamored that maybe we could have some of that come into the iPhone. And just when you were saying that, it makes me think, like, we have a little bit of that now on the iPhone.
Yeah. So, now it's almost like 3 apps at one time. And I heard this mentioned in another podcast. Somebody at some point is going to publish a post that has a definitive list of the orders, because as I understand it, whether your app, if there's two apps running in the background, whether it gets the big island or the small island has to do with the ranking. And the timer, I can tell you, always gets the last ranking, which is actually great because the timer in just a simple circle is perfect. I mean, that's all you need for the timer. Whereas most of the other apps that I have, they tend to get the bigger part of the island. I have yet to sort of figure out, if there's a competition between
the hierarchy.
The hierarchy. And I'm curious to see that over time. But so far, all I know is it basically just makes sense. The thing that could take advantage of the more space, it gets the more space, and the thing that it's fine to have a little bit of space. And when you have something in the small island, because there's not a lot of information displayed, in some ways it becomes more of just a notification that it's running and a launcher, really, because you can just tap it to jump back to the app. But it's still useful, and it's nice that they have that feature. I don't know that they could go more than 2. I mean, if you had 3 apps in the background, that would probably be a little bit too much confusing. But to have the one primary, because usually it's just one, or if 2, if it's appropriate, is really nice. So I mean, just that dynamic island feature, because it's so useful and because it's so fun, it has been like one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about it. But you can't ignore that the camera is much better too. During the week, obviously, I've been
some great pictures.
I've been working during the week, but last weekend when I got to have some fun with the camera, I was taking all sorts of pictures, and it's at least as good. It's certainly not worse, of course. Some pictures I look at them and they're like, that just seems just as good as my 13 Pro, which was already a fantastic camera. Don't get me wrong.
Right. Exactly.
And already years above, just a couple years ago, you go back a few years and you look at the pictures you took with your 10 and your 11, and let alone before that. And at the time they seemed pretty good, but now it's like, oh, wow, they're so much better. But then for other pictures, it really does do a much better job. And it does it both ways. But, I haven't done a lot of the 48 megapixel pictures, but the few that because when you get into that can get into a whole nother area of raw and how you edit them and stuff. I have not been a person that's done a lot of raw photographs on my phone, although we've had that capability, because I know that editing gets to be that the pictures are huge, and sometimes you have to use special programs to not special things like Photoshop. I mean, even the built-in Photos app can take advantage of it, but it's just a whole nother thing. But the few times that I've done it, the pictures have been great. And it's definitely showed me that the next time that I'm like on a trip, Brett, or something like that, if, when I'm seeing like, this is a beautiful vista where I have lots of light or something, I'm going to take a regular picture, and I'm also going to just click that button and take the 48 megapixel, because as the one that you were just showing me, that was just a picture outside of my office, but you can totally see the details that, if this is not a very fancy incredible picture, but if it mattered to me to see the details of the stripes of the American flag or the top of the canopy or the writing, anyone could look at that and say, oh yeah, the 48 megapixel has much more detail in it. And so if you were going to crop it more, which, sometimes you can only just get so close to something. So you're going to, you want that cropped picture. So it's nice to have the tool of the 48 megapixel, but even just the regular old 12 megapixel camera, that because it takes advantage of the photo binning, it's a nice step up. So I've been very, very happy with it. And it's one of these things that I'm sure over the course of the next year, I'm going to have all these little moments of delight. And then what matters is, 5-10 years from now, when you're looking back at the photos you've taken, how nice it's going to be that they're even better. So.
Yeah, well, like you said there in your review that you couldn't include the large size pictures in your blog post because it would just too big. The size is so incredible. But how big of a phone did you get? Jeff?
Like I got the regular one. I've never gotten the Pro phone. It's always just been the regular size.
No, I mean size of your memory. Like how much storage did you get on?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I have 256. Yeah. Because that is what I've had for the last couple of years, and it's basically been fine. But I think I know where you're going with this. When you take those bigger pictures, they take up a lot more space. And it did occur to me, I've got about maybe 90 gigabytes free right now. And I am thinking to myself, if the course of the next year, if I take a lot of these big pictures and then continue to take even more 4K video, because that's the thing that really, really takes up the space.
Yes,
there's a chance that between now and presumably I get a new phone next year, but there's a chance over the next 12 months that I may regret not having gone up to 512. I don't know. We'll see. Because a lot of the space on my phone is just like, I have a lot of home videos on there that are just there because if I'm sitting on a plane and I want to just, laugh at my kids being cute when they were young, I can do that. And of course, that's not essential. I could take that off. So I think I'm okay for now. But But
you're thinking about it already.
Yeah. And if you're a person that you can see what your current usage is, if you know you're going to use the camera a lot and you excuse me, if you find yourself at the edge of one of the current capacities, this might be a reason for you to bump and go to the next one.
Bump it up. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. Your review is just great here, going through all of this and those pictures, at first glance, I'm like, okay, well, that's not that much of a difference. But when I click through it and you have this close up there, that's pretty incredible. Plus you're, maybe a couple of miles away or something taking this picture even too. So the zoom is pretty incredible on that as well. Yeah. So the camera is also good. Now you won't mention down here also like this, that you talked a little bit about the fact that the screen is always on. You like that? You don't like that? How has that been working?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's growing on me. It's certainly having the always on screen is certainly not essential. The biggest and most prominent thing, as I pointed out, is the clock, because like right now, I'm just looking down at it. I've got two widgets below my clock, one of which has the weather and one of which has my next calendar appointment. And I mean, I can see them. I can see them, but they're not very big. I mean, they don't. I would have to sort of look a little bit closer. The time, on the other hand, is very obvious, and I really like that. I mean, just being able to glance down and see the time without having to raise my wrist and look at that. So that's pretty cool. And the background photograph that you have, I have the one, as we talked about last week, that's the photo, whatever the name of it is, that it rotates the photos every hour or something.
Photo shuffle,
Photo shuffle, thank you. And it's sort of nice that as I'm looking down here, here's sort of a silly picture of my wife that I took, 20 years ago, and looking now, and an hour ago there was a silly picture of my daughter on there. And they're very sort of grayed because they're in the background, but it's just sort of fun. So it's a surprise to me that I would have always thought that this is going to be the big new feature and the reason everybody wants to get the new iPhone.
Right.
No, it's a nice feature. It's there.
Yeah. Interesting.
It'll probably get more useful over time. It's interesting, but not really a big deal. As opposed to the watch, the always on screen on the watch has been a much bigger deal for that, because that is something that I want to be able to glance at it without being obnoxious if I'm talking to somebody else and picking up my arm to look at the watch. And then the other person's like, why am I so boring that you're not paying attention to me?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a much the always on screen on the watch is a nicer improvement. But it is a new, it's another one of the new features, and it's there. It's interesting. So.
Okay, real quick before we move off the iPhone 14, you had an interesting link that I didn't even think about this too much, but I'm glad that you linked this. It was a story in Cult of Mac that the iPhone 14 Pro provides faster 5G speeds. I mean, I don't know that Apple talked about this a whole lot, Jeff, but but Apple must have improved the modem inside the iPhone 14. What a great article here from Rajesh Pandey.
I haven't seen any discussion of this from Apple at all. And when I was doing research on it, in addition to this article, I went back and I found some articles from like last year, Brett, that weren't talking about the iPhone specifically, but they were just talking about like Qualcomm, who's the company that makes most of the 5G modems used by smartphones.
Exactly.
They were talking about how Qualcomm's technology was improving to the point that future iPhones, and that author had predicted, the iPhone 14, just, generically referring to whatever the next iPhone is, as having even better 5G speeds. And if I saw that article last year, I don't even remember it. But sure enough, there is something there. And the modems are interesting because Apple very famously wants to stop buying modems from Qualcomm. Apple wants to make their own modems. They purchased the entire modem division of somebody, was it IBM or somebody like that not too long ago?
I can't remember. Yeah,
they want a future where they make their own, because Apple likes to make their own stuff, and the modem's important, so they want to make their own modems. But for now, they're using the Qualcomm ones, and the Qualcomm modems are, excellent. Nobody disputes the quality of the Qualcomm modems. Apple just doesn't want to have to pay for it. But so anyway, sure enough, it is taking advantage of faster 5G speeds, which is nice. And I've run, I mentioned in there, I ran some tests, and I've run one or two other ones.
Right.
One of the nice things when you use something like the speed test app, which I know we always recommend to people, who's the company that makes that, Ookla or something like that. They it's a free speedtest.net. It's a free app, and what's nice is when you run it on your phone, you can see a history of all the times that I have tested, and you can see when I ran on 5G I got this speed, on Wi-Fi. So I can very easily look back at the last year of every time that I've tested my modems over time, and I can see like what's the fastest 5G I've gotten and what's the slowest, because believe me, it does vary. There are times where 5G is actually slower than LTE. But with this new modem, wouldn't it be nice if finally we have the experience of 5G in certain cities where 5G is more well developed, and New Orleans happens to be one of them right now. Of 5G, being noticeably faster than LTE, that would be really nice. So, this is still early days, wow. But it was fascinating that article was written, and that Apple, maybe it's because they don't want to, say anything nice about Qualcomm, but I'm surprised that Apple didn't advertise this, because it's a noticeable increase.
I know. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a nifty thing. Okay. Well, I will point everyone to your review of iPhone 14 Pro. Yet again, another fantastic review where you go through everything and just really point out some really nifty things, Jeff. So thanks for writing that. But we are not done with the shiny new toys. Let's go from the iPhone 14. How about, man, you had a lot of links to the Apple Watch Ultra. It's almost like it's overshadowing all of the, the upgrades to the new SE or the improved SE and the Apple Watch Series 8, although I know there's a lot of people that are reviewing that too, but you had some great links to the Apple Watch Ultra. And I think the reason we're hearing about this is because number one, it's new. And number two, a lot of the reviewers that we follow and that you follow and that you link to here, got their big review unit. So everybody's been talking about it. You linked to one which I thought was great from John Gruber at Daring Fireball. There was a great video review that you linked to from iJustine. I always like really to, Walter. Yeah. She always has like a really good practical application, how it's work. She's walking around and everything, and she even went 3 feet underwater to test like the underwater components of the Apple Watch Ultra. What are your thoughts on this generally? A lot of people are telling me that they don't know if they need it or it's too big. One link that you had to was from The Verge. And this is my favorite way that now I can tell people, like, if you want to know how big the Apple Watch Ultra is, she compared it. It turns out it's about the size of a fig Newton on your wrist. So if you really want to know how big it's going to be on your wrist, just grab a fig Newton, put it on your wrist, and then that'll give you a general idea of how big this is going to be. Just pretty incredible. People are talking about it now.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the author that was in The Verge was pointing out that she has like a smaller wrist, and so she thought it was going to be crazy, big for her. And she says it was large, but she said that she doesn't mind wearing larger watches. I mean, that's a style choice, right? Some people just wear them, and she said it was actually, okay. So although Apple did come out with 3 new Apple Watches this year, it's the Apple Watch Ultra, which officially goes on sale today, and that's the one that the reviewers' embargoes just lifted, I guess, yesterday. And so that's the one that's really all in the news right now. And it's interesting because it really, I mean, this is a big step forward in the world of Apple Watch because of all of the stuff on it. Let's talk about the size, because that's what you were talking about. Yeah. I have not yet seen one in person, and I really want to see it. And I know that you might have an opportunity to do that today, right?
Yes, I might. I'm going to try. I'm in Chicago right now, as you can probably tell some of my background there. And you and I, we've met in Chicago several times for conferences and stuff. And right on Michigan Avenue, right on the lake or on the river, there is the beautiful Apple store. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I always enjoy going to that store in a way. It's beautiful. And man, I'm hoping that later today, I'll let people know next week if I get a chance to test it. But you haven't put it on your wrist yet either, but no, I may go to an Apple store. I'm sure.
Yeah, I may go to my local Apple store this weekend if they have one, just to sort of see how big it is, because I just don't have a sense of it yet. And I have a larger wrist, so I probably wouldn't mind. But the larger size, it's bigger because it's tougher, right? So it has to be bigger to have sort of the increased industrial design. But what I've been pleased to hear is that it is not lighter. I mean, it is not heavier, rather, because by using the titanium, which is a very light material, I think it may actually be lighter than the stainless steel model that I've been wearing for years. So from that standpoint, you don't really feel like it's heavy in an obnoxious way. It's just going to be a little bit bigger. And I wanted to see, like, how does it fit, like, under like a long sleeve shirt? Is it too tight? Does it look too big on your arm?
Yeah, right.
But another thing that I thought was interesting is it was last year when the Apple Watch Series 7 first came out that Apple increased the screen size by just 1 millimeter. And that number, 1 millimeter, sounds infinitesimally small, but it actually does make a difference. Like, it's easier to read the text on a Series 7 or 8 than it is on a Series 6 and earlier. And likewise, the initial reviews have said the same thing about the Apple Watch Ultra, that it's the size of it, it's just a little bit bigger. And part of that just has to be with the overall bulk of it and the fact that it's a flat screen. But they say it is actually easier to read things. It's easier to use the on-screen keyboard. Somebody in one of the reviews was remarking that this is the first Apple Watch that if you're reading a text on your screen, you might want to actually pay attention to whether anybody's really close to you, because they could probably read the text as well. So that's sort of interesting that, you know, it's getting a little bit bigger. Many people have remarked that because of the size, it feels more like a computer on your wrist. And I think that's a function, not just of the size, but the fact that it's got the completely flat screen. You know, other Apple Watches since the first design have the rounded screen around the edge, which sort of makes it, you know, that's a trick that people use, that when you have a rounded edge, it makes it seem a little bit smaller and more svelte than it really is. But when you have that straight top, which is done for the purposes of protecting it, it's got the casing that goes around the edge of it. It gives it more protection, but it also makes it feel more like it's like a tiny iPad on your wrist or something like that, or an iPhone, as opposed to something else. So anyway, all of these, I mean, these are all design features that just gives the Apple Watch Ultra a completely different feel, one that I look forward to trying out, but also a lot more utility because of the durability and because of the bigger screen. So like, that's one thing that people were talking about. The action button, people have been raving about it. And that's the one that I'm so jealous about. I so hope that we have an action button on all Apple Watches in the future, because everybody says that it makes a big difference. I mean, from people that are really active outdoors talking about how nice it is to like to mark parts of their run and stuff like that by using the action button. Or even one of the reviews was saying that somebody that likes to cook a lot, they say the number one thing that they use their Apple Watch for is starting timers and stuff. And she said that she made the action button start a timer. So when she's cooking and she just wants to quickly start a timer, just tap that button and then go on and doing your business. Most of the time when I use the timer on my Apple Watch, I use Siri to talk to it. But it'd be nice if I'm other people in the kitchen, you just want to tap a button and move forward. So, whatever it is that you assign it to, it's just, you have such quick and easy access to that function that it's gotten universally good reviews. I've also heard people saying that the dial, what's that called? The digital crown, that because it's
digital
bigger,
crown,
it's actually easier to work with, which makes sense, because Apple said that they made it larger so that if you're wearing gloves or, for like skiing and stuff like that, you can more easily touch it.
It's very
but even with just your fingers, people say that the new digital crown works really well too. And then, go ahead.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, just quickly, I just was gonna just go where you were saying. John Gruber here at Daring Fireball says the action button is the biggest difference. In fact, he even said, 3 buttons on watch is not too much. Right? It's to have just what you were saying there. And I like how he says here, you can get the action button in any color that you want as long as it's orange, right? Like that's the only option there, which I think I kind of like. Maybe a little bit the idea that you don't really have a lot of choices when it comes to the Ultra, right? I mean, you get only the titanium, you
just
get
one style,
only that size. That's right. There's only the one size there. It's like you're not going to make a lot of choices on things that going. But just to underscore something that you said, just across the board, I've seen everybody just say, even John Gruber says, it looks big. There's no getting around the fact that it looks big on your wrist. Even if you have a big wrist, the Apple Watch Ultra, it looks big. But it's not as heavy. It doesn't feel as heavy as what it looks like, if that makes any sense. But I've seen everybody has talked that. Even iJustine, when she was talking about and unboxing that, and I was watching NKHDB, Marquez, when he was unboxing it as well, and he said the exact same thing. Like it probably looks a little bit bigger because it is that flattened face on there, Jeff. And, as opposed to we have rounded edges. And, for those of us that do wear long sleeve shirts, for example, or suits and things like that, I thought the exact same thing. I want to know, how is that going to work underneath, like a dress shirt or something like that when you have a long sleeve? Is it going to be, right now I've got my Series 5 on, it's very seamless the way that the sleeve can kind of, snug around it. But I don't want it to get hung up or anything like that on an Ultra. But the only way we're going to know is to go and try one out in person. So we got to do that soon.
One other thing that I thought was interesting from the reviews that are out there is, for the first time, it's been interesting to see the different perspectives of people that are experts in different uses of the Apple Watch. Because, for example, there was I don't even know if I linked to it, but there was one by Runner's World. For someone that's just a runner, it really, because of the extra time and stuff, because the extra battery life, rather, for someone running like marathons, it seems to be like just about everything that a lot of those folks have been looking for. And then there was also some reviews by some of these, publications that I don't normally read, like what was called the Gear Loop, which is
Men's Journal.
And Men's Journal too, but some people that are more into the extreme outdoor sports. And they were pointing out that for some folks that are really at the edge, it doesn't go far enough, because the Garmin, you might want something that's going to last 7 days for hiking a mountain. And for those people, a dedicated $1,500 Garmin watch that is going to last for a week and have some extra features on it may actually be better. But for people that are not at the very, very top, for people that are sort of the medium to more entry level, it's going to be more than enough. Plus, you get all the advantages of the Apple Watch, which, Garmin doesn't have. Just, for example, the fact that you can use it as a telephone to call people and stuff. And so it may actually be an overall better thing. Plus, for people that are not at that extreme level at all, they're just, more outdoor enthusiasts like runners and stuff like that. Maybe it's sort of a perfect fit for them. So, Apple was never saying there will never be a need for any other sports watches again. Of course, you're going to have people that want the dedicated things at the very highest level. But for the happy middle of the market, it really looks like Apple has gotten what folks are looking for. And one more thing I'll mention is the speaker. It's got a much louder speaker on it, right? Just for phone calls and stuff and listening to things. But it also has the that sort of safety feature that you can play an alarm. And if you're out in the middle of the woods lost, you could play this thing and hopefully somebody would find you and stuff. But I saw that some people point out that even if you're a person, and many, stereotypically might be a woman that would say this, but it could be a man as well. If you're sort of in a city, not in the middle of the woods, but in an unsafe place where you might like the fact that you could very easily, for example, have your action button assigned that if you press your action button, it's going to make this super loud noise to attract attention. And, if it's dark at night in the city, that might give you some additional protection. So, it's got all of these use cases for different people. It's just full of possibilities. And as I said in my post, I'm fascinated by this watch. It's the new features it has, changes so many things about what it means to be an Apple Watch. It's neat stuff. So for a lot of people, this is going to be the best watch ever. And for people that don't get it, I hope that some of the features come down to the other watches in the future. Really cool.
All right. Just speaking of articles, maybe you don't normally link to, you had a good article from Women's Health magazine.
Yeah, she has a great review.
Yeah. But before we move off the Apple Watch, just one other thing that we haven't mentioned that, Apple paid a pretty good amount of attention to in their video when they were announcing it is, the ability for it to measure temperature, right? Mm-hmm. Some people were saying that, it's not that great, or you have to measure the temperature right as you wake up in the morning. But obviously for women's health in general, this can be a great way to track, the temperature, throughout the month, for example, and other things like that. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I'm interested to see more and more people taking advantage of the temperature sensors that are coming. And by the way, they're on the Series 8 as well, right? Or to some extent. And then the Ultra has a little bit more.
The Series 8 and the Ultra. So either one has it. And, that's the sort of thing that you sort of need to track yourself. I understand, for a number of months to actually get something accurate.
Right.
So I feel like we're probably about 2 to 3 months or maybe 4 months away from people posting reviews that have really, gone through a number of different months.
Exactly.
And then you can start to see how useful it is. But the initial indications are that it's really helpful. So we'll see.
One more shiny new toy that you might be getting another delivery today, Mr. Jeff.
That's right. That's another one.
The AirPods Pro 2. Hopefully that's coming for you today. You linked to one article here because I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this, but there have been, this was a great article that you linked to where, it was a collection, a roundup of different reviews. And of course, I think overall, everybody's just like, yep, it's better. It's easier to use, and you should get them if you're really into the AirPods Pro, and yours is coming today, hopefully.
Yeah, I was just checking the UPS. Mine hasn't been delivered yet, but I suspect it will be delivered by the time our podcast is finishing recording, just as happened last week.
Good.
Initial reviews did come out this week on it. And, on the one hand, they look almost exactly the same as the AirPods Pro that have been out for over 2 years now. If you look closer, you'll see that the speaker grills are in a slightly different configuration.
Okay.
Apple says that the tips are specific for the generation 2, but I've seen people say that they're so close to the generation 1 that they suspect that if you get third-party tips, because that's what I've always used for my AirPod, or used many of the times. If you buy third-party tips on Amazon, they will probably still work just as well. That's one of the things I want to explore this weekend when I have a chance to get mine. But that if you just see somebody, you're not going to obviously see that it's the version 2, because the case is pretty much the exact same size as the case that people have right now. One difference is on the bottom of the case. Instead of seeing just the one charging thing, you'll also see a little speaker grill because it makes noise, and on the side you'll see the place where someone could attach a lanyard. But if you're just seeing somebody on the street, you're probably not going to know whether they have the AirPods Pro original generation or second generation. But the interior stuff, I mean, what they have improved are the things that matter, most noticeably being the elimination of noise, the noise reduction stuff.
Noise cancellation, right?
It's noticeably better. I think Apple says twice as good. I'm not really sure what scale they're measuring on, but that's the sort of thing that I look forward to testing. And I'm very excited about the volume, changes on the side. So again, I should have one in the next hour or two, and I look forward to trying it out. But the initial reviews have been good. And the thing is, nobody probably needs to run out and buy this. I bought it because the ones that I have now are starting to have some issues with the charging. And so I figured I've had this since day one. It was probably time to upgrade anyway. But nobody has to run out and get them. But if you are in the market for something, then it's nice that there'll be some of these new features available. So I look forward to putting it through its paces.
Yeah, like you said, the two things that I think I'm most excited to try is the improved noise cancellation. Even when I flew to Chicago, again, I can't even get in a plane today now without having noise cancellation in my AirPods Pro. I never really get into the Bose side and a lot of that noise cancellation, and I regret that a little bit now because I can see how it's improved my life, just in the fact that how loud things are. But I'm excited to see that, and then the volume change. I was just reading here in this link that you added that it's very subtle, right? It's just a little bit of a swipe up, and it sounds like that it gives you some kind of a little click or something, to let you know, to verify that you made a change. But I just love that, because if I'm running or something like that with my AirPods Pro in, I have to, either get out my phone to turn the volume up or, make change like that. And I just love the fact that it's now going to be on that, and I can't wait to try that out. So good. Okay. Whoa, that's a lot of new toys. And we have more to come. Hopefully I'll start getting some of my toys in as well. But let's just get a quick switch over. I feel like this can be like a huge, in the know section here, because I've had several links on iOS 16 tips today. Where some hidden features, some extras on this. Let's just talk about some of these quick, and then you and I can just even share our other favorite iOS 16 tips that we've been dealing with so far.
Yeah, we've been talking about the shiny new hardware toys that you need to spend money on to take advantage of them.
Right.
But the new shiny toys in iOS 16, just about anybody can upgrade and take advantage of those. And anytime that you have a major new iOS or iPadOS, you're going to have a lot of little, hidden features. And I know we have them every year, but I have to admit, it almost feels like this year there's more than normal. Maybe it's just my, maybe I would say that every year, and but I really feel like there's all these little bitty things. And some of these we talked about, like duplicate, photo detection and stuff like that. But one of them that I thought was interesting, it's a tiny little thing, but you're connected to Wi-Fi somewhere, right? And someone else comes up next to you and says, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" And usually I'm like, well, I mean, if I just connected an hour ago, I might remember it. But if my iPhone connected because I've connected in the past, I'm not going to even remember what it was. And I don't even know. I can't even remember if there was a way to find it out, prior. But on iOS 16, you can just go into the Wi-Fi thing and you can just tap on the password and it will display it in plain text. And that way you can tell it to someone. Now, if the other person has an iPhone, there's actually ways that modern iPhones, one iPhone can share the Wi-Fi password to another one, which is an awesome feature that I love. It is. But if the other person doesn't have the right, setup, or if they have an Android or a computer or whatever else it is, I mean, this one tiny little feature is really cool. So, I mean, that's just an example of, cool. I don't know who thought that we needed to do this, but it's a really cool thing. The landscape Face ID is another one too, that, it's not often that I have my phone in this position, but it's nice that if I do, I could still unlock it. That's a cool feature. feature. Was it necessary? Probably not. I'm trying to think of some of the other little.
I always enjoyed that on the iPad. Like you could do, the iPad could do Face ID either way. This was a neat article I like that you linked to from Podfeet, where they're talking about a few iOS 16 tiny delights. The battery percentage. I mean, just like you were saying, it's just a tiny, tiny little thing, and we could have a battery percentage before, but now it actually has numbers on the little battery icon.
Which and this one's actually about to change. We should note that when 16.1 comes out, like right now, if you display the number in 16.0, the shape of the battery stays the same until it gets really low, and then it changes. But when 16.1 comes out in a few weeks, the actual shape behind the number will decrease over time, which at some point may make it a little bit harder to read the number because half of the number is on one shape and half, But that's just something that they're paying attention to and changing and stuff. Dictations, we've talked about the messages improvements that you can send to messages. Another silly one is I take a lot of screenshots, and I know that I do it because of the website that I have. I don't know if other people take screenshots as much as I do. Many times I will take a screenshot, like for example, on my iPad, I might take a screenshot of something and then crop it in, and then I just want to paste it into like GoodNotes or something like that. But then when I'm done it's like, well, then do you want to save the screenshot or not? One of the things that iOS 16 has and iPad 16 will have too is this option called copy and delete, which basically in a single step does the two things that I do every single solitary time,
all the time,
which is copy what I've cropped it to, but then don't bother to save it because I copied it. That's all I wanted it for. So I mean, again, no one of these tiny little features is life changing, but they're all really useful, and that's what's really exciting about it. Really exciting.
We have talked a lot about the lock screen in iOS 16, and this was another neat story you linked to from John Voorhees over at Mac Stories, where he has a roundup of the lock screen widgets. I got to tell you, I've only just barely, used some of the basics, like putting weather on there and maybe the calendar. Like Fantastical has a really neat widget that they put on there as well. I almost wish I could have more rows, more widgets on there, and maybe that's going to be coming, because I really think that Apple did a good job, and like we've seen in the past, they start very small, right, and then they can increase or improve things as we go along. But this is a good roundup on here as well. That there's just going to be more and more lock screen widgets, I think, becoming available. Right now, it's just the basic options there, even like Overcast, for example, and some of these others. But I'm glad that you linked to this though, because we'll start seeing a lot more, I think, come to the lock screen as well.
Yeah, and they make more sense with the always on screen, although, as I indicated a little earlier, for me, they're still a little tiny. I mean, like you said, if they could have a second row and that you could even have the option to have something that's like double size, so that the height of the widget was almost the same as the height of the time.
Right.
I would prefer that.
Right.
And again, maybe that's just because, my eyesight's not as good as some other folks. Maybe a 20-year-old with perfect eyesight thinks that they are more than big enough. But, lock screen widgets is something I continue to be intrigued by. Has not yet made a big difference in my life, but I'm still interested to see what these third-party developers are coming up with.
Well, I will make sure that we link to some of those articles that include all of the iOS 16 tips. But quickly, let me get to a couple of you and I can talk about the ones that we prefer, and like when we are talking about the in the know tips that we have here. My favorite has been very similar to what we were just talking about, is on the lock screen, but not with the widgets. I got to tell you, one of the silly tiny things, just like you were saying, Jeff, that I am so thrilled with is that now when I'm playing music or a podcast or anything that is, playing something, even a video or something like that, then my phone locks because I just let it sit, to the side and it plays. Well, you can either see the album art. I'm a visual guy, so I always like to see the album art of something that I'm playing, whether I'm playing from Spotify or Apple Music or something like that. Well, I believe, I can't even remember the way that it was, but I think it was always like a very small album art that was on, the lock screen there, right? And so I couldn't see it as big as I really wanted to. I'd have to unlock my phone and go into Spotify or Apple Music, full version of the album art. Well, now, again, this is so silly and stupid simple, but I love it, is that once my lock screen goes on my phone and I can just tap it to see it, I can tap on the little album art, the little tiny mini album art, and it will go into full screen, just like the picture I'm showing here on the screen right now. It will go into a large version of the album art, and you can tap the large version if you want to minimize it again to go back into that mini player. I love this. It's been so fun for me to be able to have that, because now if I'm washing the dishes or so, I can glance over there and at least I can see, something that might be playing just by tapping on it. So again, very, very simple. And I don't think most people will even recognize that it's there, and that's a possibility, but you can simply just, once it's playing, you simply just tap on the little album art and it goes into full screen. You tap the album art again and it can go back into that mini player on there. I'm just so thrilled that Apple, added a little tiny thing like that for some of us that are more visual. It just makes me very, very happy. That's my tip for today.
That's a great one. I love it. I love it. So my in the news tip has to do with status icons and symbols at the top of your iPhone. And the reason that I am providing this tip is because it goes back to the dynamic island. So you don't have to have the dynamic island to take advantage of this tip. Any iPhone will have all of these little things at the top, status indicators and stuff like that, icons. And some of them we know very, very well, such as what is the strength of your cell phone signal? What is the strength of your Wi-Fi symbol? What is your battery life? But there's a bunch of them up there that you may not see all the time. And so, for example, this week when I was looking at the dynamic island and when I was on a phone call, I saw, I guess it was an orange dot up there. And I've seen the orange dot before. And I was like, oh, no, what is that orange dot? Well, sure enough, at the very bottom of this article, it reminds us that the orange dot means that the microphone is being used, which is good because if there's an app using your microphone, you would want to know about it, because otherwise, what if I didn't realize I'd be recorded? And if there's a green dot, it means that your camera is on. Again, something you would want to know that your camera is on. Makes perfect sense if you're doing a FaceTime call, and the orange dot makes perfect sense if I'm using the phone, but otherwise, what are those dots? But this page of the Apple website has all these other symbols that you might not see all the time. One that now that we have, and again, we've been able to have 2 different SIMs in an iPhone for a while, but in the age of eSIMs, maybe you're even more likely to have 2 different cell phone coverages at the same time. And if you do that, there is an icon that you will see that I heard someone describe as a whole bunch of exclamation points, because it's sort of like the, you had it at the screen there if you scroll up a little bit. It's sort of like, the increasing size of bars that people associate with cell phone coverage, but it's a bar at the top and then another little thing of dots at the bottom to indicate that there's actually 2 different cell phone things going on there. So again, if you don't know what that is and you see it on your screen, you might be like, what is that? So this page of Apple's website also has like the abbreviations for the different types of like, are you on 5G? Are you on 5G plus? Are you LTE? So it's a good, if you look through this, if you can tell me honestly that after looking at this page, you already knew what every single one of these icons was, then, good gold star on your Apple. That is amazing.
There will be a test,
because I thought I knew all these things, and I looked through it and there was quite a few of them like, oh yeah, that's what that is. That's what that is. So this is a nice page
I like
to take
this
a look
one.
at. Oh, that's a great one too.
This is a great page. Yeah, this is good here, because sometimes your time in the upper left corner, right, is either like green, you're on a phone call, and a lot of times I'll see if it's blue if I go into a different app, but I'm getting directions somewhere, right, in my map is showing me directions, but I'll go to check email or something like that. Well, then I look up in the top left corner and my clock it has a blue background on it. And that just tells you that some app is actively using your location. Oh, this is great, Jeff. What a fantastic page. I didn't even know this. And like you said, I feel like I've got to go through here. Like I got to test myself. Do I know what each of these little symbols mean? I don't, but man, now this is good for a good refresh sometimes too. And I'm so excited about that little orange dot. I sometimes see that over on the side there, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? What's using something? But now I know, and that's great. Okay, so check your delivery status. Any deliveries yet, Jeff?
Not yet, but it should be
before
just
we
a
go.
couple of minutes
Not
away.
yet.
So
okay.
Soon.
All right. Fantastic. Okay, Jeff. Thanks as always, and we'll talk to you next with your new AirPods Pro too.
Talk to you then. Take care, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.